Joined now by Erik Slater. He is covering the Brooklyn Nets for Clutch Points. Thank you so much, Erik, for hopping on with me. You're down in Miami covering Nets Heat, and I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by with me.
Definitely, man. Got to get down here, some sunshine, starting to get cold up in New York. I'm already getting messages about in the 30s there. So I got to squeeze out a little more sunshine and even got a Nets win. So it's been a good week so far.
Good stuff, and against a Miami team that was playing all of their guys for the most part, including Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, like pretty good stuff for the Brooklyn Nets to get a win on the road like that. So 2-2 at this stage. We're recording this on Thursday night, so those that are watching this video are gonna wonder, hey, why aren't you covering the back to back that just happened? This is the reason why. So we're recording this on Thursday night, but losing close games against Cleveland and Dallas, winning some good games against Charlotte and Miami. Is that kind of the story with this team right now, up and down? What do you think is the story in the early going?
I think the story is honestly that this team could very well be 4-0. And, there's a very real world where they're 4-0 and there's a little bit of buzz and talk about this team right now of how well they're playing. And I think within the Nets community, there still is that buzz and that talk because those two games that you saw them play against Cleveland and then against Dallas, they were up by 6 with, I think, a minute 20 left in that Cleveland game. They had a couple of bad turnovers. Donovan Mitchell hit a couple of tough shots. So very much in that game. But then in the Dallas game, they really played even better in that game, in my opinion, without Nic Claxton and Cam Johnson, two of their starters. And then Luka Doncic just goes ballistic and hits 4 straight threes, the last of which was a hook shot off glass. That is just one of the most ridiculous shots you're ever going to see. So, the Nets could have executed better for sure down the stretch of those games. But if it weren't for two very high-level performances from two of the league's best scorers, they win those two games. Then they go into Charlotte, and Charlotte didn't look good, full disclosure. But the Nets, they got to get credit. They dominated them. And then they go into Miami, severely shorthanded without 3 starters, Claxton, Cam Johnson, Spencer Dinwiddie, all out. Dennis Smith Jr., also a bench guy who's been playing for them, also out. And they're playing, some deep guys on their bench. Armani Brooks, a two-way, comes in, puts up 17 points on 5 of 6 shooting from 3. Trendon Watford goes 11, 4 and 4, 4 of 6 from the field. The Nets, Cam Thomas, Mikal Bridges, their top 2 guys, struggled for the majority of this game. Ben Simmons didn't have a great game by any stretch, and they're still able to come back, overcome a 12-point deficit heading into the fourth quarter and come away with the win. So I think the story really is that the Nets are playing high-level basketball for the most part here, and there's a very realistic world where they could be 4-0 right now.
It's got to be nice to not have all of the associated drama of the last couple of years and just playing good basketball. Like, that's the story. That's what's going on right now with Brooklyn, and we'll see what happens on this back-to-back and then figure out how to kind of go from there. But between Cam Thomas stepping up and doing some crazy things in his role and Ben Simmons, let's go with that one, actually. The Ben Simmons experience so far, it's got to be more or less how you expected it, how we talked about it at the beginning of the year. Is it better than expected or worse than expected in your mind?
I'd say it's somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't say it's better than expected. I wouldn't say that he's played, terrible by any stretch. I think that it's been up and down. And I think the really interesting development about this, which is something that I've talked about, is that his 2 best performances came against Dallas and against Charlotte. Had some struggles last night in Miami, but his best performances, it's a tiny sample size, obviously, so we're gonna have to wait for more games, but it's come after Nic Claxton went down, and the conversation heading into the season was how do Claxton and how do Simmons coexist as non-shooters in the Nets starting 5 and 2 guys who are going to garner heavy minutes in the rotation. And Claxton goes down, and Ben Simmons is kind of playing this 5-out point center role. I was talking to Erik Spoelstra before the game yesterday, and he was talking about the space that Ben has been able to create for the Nets, the pace that they're playing at. They're playing at the 8th highest pace in the league right now, and how a guy like Cam Thomas has been able to take advantage of that space and get to his spots. And Ben's really always been at his best when he's been playing in this 5-out. That's why you saw Philadelphia, kind of try to convert Joel Embiid, get him to shoot more threes and be able to space out in the perimeter, just because it's logical. If you have a guy like Ben who's not a shooter and you want to be able to attack the paint, you don't want a guy in there. So him playing this 5-out, being surrounded by shooters, being able to push the ball, try to get to the basket a little bit, which he needs to do more, 100%, but being able to spray out the shooters is when he's looked best. So I think that Ben, the first game wasn't great, but he's played high-level defense the whole time, played great defense in the fourth quarter last night. He's at 10 rebounds a game. He's at around 8 assists per game. He's in the top 20 in the league in both of those categories. He definitely needs to attack the basket more, and I think there were some glaring points last night, especially in the fourth quarter, where he didn't look very assertive, and he looked pretty quick to get the ball out of his hands. So that's something that's going to be, something to monitor, and definitely is a little bit of a concern in fourth quarters of games, especially once Claxton comes back. How are you going to have those two guys on the floor if Ben doesn't really want to look for his shot? How are they going to coexist? You look to bring one of those guys off the bench. If so, who is it? So the way that I would pretty much summarize Ben Simmons' performance right now is he's doing certain things at a high level for sure. He's rebounding the ball. He's getting his assist numbers, could be a little bit more aggressive going to the basket, but he's playing great defense, and he's really been able to keep the Nets afloat in these games without Nic Claxton from a rebounding and defensive standpoint using his size and versatility.
Should be fascinating to track throughout the year, and I do agree that the Claxton-Simmons dynamic is going to be something to watch, because Claxton is somebody that you'd like to have around and you'd like to continue to build around as well. So having two guys that are sort of juxtaposed in their styles and their abilities to kind of coexist should be fascinating as well. But hey, I mean, in theory, with the shooting that this team has with Cam Thomas and Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and even Dorian Finney-Smith and guys like that, like I remember watching this team last year and watching them go 5 out against Nikola Jokic and winning a game, stealing a game in Denver because of that ability to space. And if you have Ben Simmons basically playing in the middle of all that spacing, then in theory it should be pretty good to be able to match up like that. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Interesting that you just brought that up, because Jock Vaughn was talking about the Nets and what they've looked like with Simmons in this 5-out going small, and just talking about different things. He was talking specifically about Dorian Finney-Smith, who's having a great start to the season, and what he's been able to do. Kind of, he's calling Dorian the small ball 5. Really, it's kind of Ben is kind of the point center. So it's interesting, with Ben Simmons in the rotation, describing what positions people are playing in articles, especially when you're writing it out, it's always an adventure. But he was talking about that, and what he was saying is, I've never been scared to go 5-out. I played 5-out, played small a lot last year. He actually brought it up and said, we played small and won a game against Nikola Jokic, the best big in the league and the MVP, and said, so he said pretty much, I will never have any fear or shy away from doing that because of a matchup. So I took that as, I've always thought that he was eventually, Jock this year was going to go more towards staggering Ben and Nic, because he went just after 2 games last season. He went away from that look because it really is difficult offensively in the half court. You have to be playing defense at such a high level. You have to be so committed to pushing the ball in transition to field even an average offense with those 2 non-shooters. So I think eventually he will go to that. And I think that this team's success in this small sample size, but especially Ben's success, especially in those Dallas and Charlotte games, I think speaks to what you could see later on. And once we get to that point, the real question in my eyes is Ben and Nic Claxton, who is going to be closing games in those situations?
I do rotation charts for Denver, and I like to post those, and I think people have some general value with them. It would be so fascinating to do the Nets rotation chart, because they would have so many different combinations that you can go to, and you're always
a lot of guys playing too. The Nets are
legit
14, 15 deep. There's been injuries, so guys have been forced in, but they have guys who can play. I mean, Lonnie Walker is a guy I've been talking about. He's around 17 points per game. He's shooting, I don't know, 47% from 3. I'm pretty sure he has a plus 24 net rating swing. It's the highest on the team. I tweeted that out. So you got him coming off the bench, and you have, like I said, Armani Brooks and Trendon Watford. The Nets scored 50 bench points last night. Their bench guys were the best guys on the floor for most of the game, and they really allowed them to steal a win. So they're deep. Ben, Nic offer a lot of rotation versatility. Even a guy like Trendon Watford, 6'8", can handle the ball, is playing point guard last night. They've got a lot going on there. So those rotation charts they'd be a headache to say the least.
That sounds about right. All right. Well, so one more thing before we head to in-season tournament talk. The Nic Claxton injury, how serious is that? Is this something that Nets fans should be concerned about?
Pretty much. It was kind of a strange injury. What we saw was Nic got his feet tangled with Damian Jones against Cleveland in the season opener. Went down, he was running down the floor, got his feet tangled, went down, finished the rest of the game, definitely looked a little bit like he was laboring. And then Jock, after the game, didn't say there was an injury, just said, working his way into shape, whatever, things along those lines. Then he's out. Since then, he's out tomorrow, Friday at Chicago. So, it's definitely not good to see somebody, obviously a starter, go down with an ankle injury, and he's going to be missing his 4th game now. We'll see what the status report is ahead of that Saturday matchup with Boston, but I wouldn't say it's anything the Nets should be concerned about long term. Nic was in a walking boot, I think, first 2 days after the injury, but that was just precautionary. We saw the Nets do the same thing with Dennis Smith Jr. in the preseason, and then he came back and played in the opener first 3 games and looked fine until going down again with a hip injury, separate thing. So I wouldn't be worried. I think it's just one of those things early in the year. Guys get ankles. Spencer Dinwiddie's dealing with the same thing. I think the guy that's a little bit more interesting, from an injury standpoint, is Cam Johnson, who had what they call a calf contusion, a calf bruise. Then they got an MRI. They said it was a calf strain. Now he's out for 10 days. So we'll see what that comes to be. This is in his left leg, same leg he had a hamstring injury and missed all of training camp. Jock Vaughn said that the two things are unrelated, but definitely something to monitor moving forward.
That's ambiguous. That's never a great sign when it comes to what an injury means for a team, what an injury means for a player. So hopefully that's a whole lot of nothing, and we can not even talk about it by the time we talk next year. All right, so let's talk in-season tournament. Give me a take on the in-season tournament. The Nets are in a group with Chicago, Boston, Orlando, Toronto. Are you excited for this thing?
I am. I mean, maybe not to the level that some people are in the NBA, the way they're talking about it, but I understand it. You're trying to create more intrigue, more interest in the regular season. I get it. And I think sometimes people forget in the NBA that, not all these guys are making $20, $30 million a year, and there's money on the line here. And, I'm sure not everybody's familiar with the exact numbers. I kind of loosely remember, but if you win, I mean, it's real money coming to these guys, especially there's guys in rotations that are on minimum contracts that are going to be playing for this. The guys at the end of the bench, maybe they won't be in, but they're certainly going to be rooting hard for their guys in these ones. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested to see how it goes. I think that it's a nice little wrinkle, to add into the regular season. The courts, I think, everybody's talking about those. The Nets are going to be playing tomorrow on a bright red court. Nearly the entire court's red. So I might have some Bulls players lying down on the floor in camouflage and I saw somebody tweet out that they were like, the NBA wanted to add more intrigue to the regular season, and now they have every franchise playing on Boise State's football field or something like that. So, it'll be fun. The Nets have next Friday, they have a nationally televised game in Boston as their second in-season tournament game. Somebody going to cover that, and to see that how they match up with this revamped Celtics squad, who everybody considers a top 2-3 team in the league. It'll be really fun. So I definitely think that there will be some intrigue, and I'm expecting a little bit of a heightened intensity from the guys.
We will see what happens. He is Erik Slater of Clutch Points covering the Brooklyn Nets. Erik, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it, and hopefully this goes well, and we can talk to each other in 6 weeks.
Sounds good. Maybe we'll be coming back with a Brooklyn Nets in-season tournament championship. So we'll see.
I love it. Have a good one.
All right.